The mist hangs low over the silent forest, a gauze of silver obscuring ancient boughs and winding paths that lead into a heart of deep, impenetrable green. And here, in the quietest hour before dawn, a subtle hum seems to vibrate through the very soil, a frequency felt more than heard, a whisper of a world operating on principles far beyond our conventional understanding, a phenomenon known only to a select few as the Entangled Kingdom, a realm where the lines between individual organisms blur into a singular, breathtaking intelligence, a collaborative consciousness that has thrived in secrecy for millennia. And it is into this veiled world that we now journey, to unravel a mystery not of stone and ruin, but of life and connection itself, a story written not on parchment, but in the very roots and mycelial networks that cradle this hidden earth, a testament to a power both serene and formidable that challenges our most fundamental notions of life on this planet. To comprehend the scale of this enigma, one must first look to the foundational science that hints at its possibility. For in laboratories around the world, researchers have documented the uncanny abilities of fungal mycelium, vast subterranean networks acting as neural pathways, transmitting electrical and chemical signals across great distances, warning distant trees of blight or insect invasion, and redistributing nutrients from areas of plenty to areas of need in a silent, benevolent economy. And beyond the fungal, studies into plant communication reveal a complex language of airborne hormones and root-secreted chemicals, a constant chatter between flora that speaks of danger, opportunity, and communal well-being, while in the animal kingdom, the hive mind of social insects demonstrates a collective decision-making process so seamless it appears to be the work of a single brilliant intellect. And it is at the confluence of these three streams, the fungal, the floral, and the faunal, that the Entangled Kingdom is theorized to exist, a synergistic system where these individual networks have somehow interwoven, creating a meta-consciousness, a sentient ecosystem that perceives, learns, and remembers, a living, breathing entity whose history is written in the growth rings of its oldest trees and the genetic memory of its most ancient fungal cores. The first documented hint of the kingdom's existence came not from a biologist, but from a meticulous surveyor named Alistair Finch, who in the late 19th century was tasked with mapping a vast, uncharted tract of wilderness. And his journals speak not of grand discoveries, but of persistent anomalies, of compass needles that swung erratically near certain granite formations, of strange geometric patterns of moss growth that defied natural explanation, and of a pervasive, unsettling silence in specific valleys, a silence he noted was not an absence of sound, but a suppression of it, as if the air itself had become thick and absorbent. And his most compelling entry describes a single, perfect circle of vibrant purple-flowered flora, a circle he could find no logical reason for, surrounded by a ring of trees whose branches all grew inward, as if in reverence or protection, a site he deemed a garden not planted by human hands, but cultivated by the landscape's own will, a poetic observation that would later be seen as the first faint glimpse of the kingdom's deliberate design, a design that would remain a cartographic curiosity for decades until new technology allowed for a deeper probe into the mystery. The true investigation began with the advent of satellite imagery and advanced bioacoustic monitoring, when a team of interdisciplinary scientists analyzing geological and botanical data noticed a vast, irregular region where chlorophyll levels and soil composition displayed a startlingly uniform consistency, a biomagnetic hotspot that pulsed with a low-frequency resonance detectable by sensitive instruments, a hum that synchronized with the diurnal cycles of the forest, growing stronger at dawn and dusk. And to explore this, researchers deployed a network of silent, non-invasive sensors, recording not just sound, but subtle electrical fields and chemical gradients. And the data painted a picture of a coordinated system where the health of a single oak tree in the north was intrinsically linked to the flowering of a cluster of orchids miles to the south, where the migration paths of deer herds were subtly guided by shifts in the scent profiles of the undergrowth, all orchestrated without a central leader, but through a distributed intelligence, a democracy of life forms voting with chemical signals and electrical impulses, a revelation that pointed towards a single, inescapable conclusion. This was not merely an ecosystem, but an organism in its own right, a superorganism with a will and a way of its own. The search for a physical center, a nexus for this vast network, led researchers deep into the most protected core of the forest, to a place they codenamed the Heartwood Nexus, a grove dominated by a single colossal tree of an unidentifiable species, its bark resembling polished stone and its leaves shimmering with a faint bioluminescent glow after sunset. And surrounding this patriarch were stones arranged in concentric circles that pulsed with a soft inner light, stones that upon analysis were found to be a unique form of crystalline silica, capable of acting as a natural battery and transmitter for the bioelectrical currents flowing through the mycelial grid. And it was here that the interconnectedness became most apparent, for the air was thick with the scent of ozone and damp earth, and the usual forest sounds were replaced by a profound, resonant quiet, a silence that felt observant and intelligent. And data readings from this spot showed it to be the origin point of the rhythmic biomagnetic pulses that regulated the entire kingdom, a place that served not as a brain, but perhaps as a heart, pumping the vital information and energy that sustained the collective consciousness of the entangled whole. The kingdom, however, is not a passive entity, and its intelligence extends to formidable defensive capabilities, as a group of unsanctioned loggers discovered to their peril several years ago. For when their machinery entered a protected sector, the forest itself seemed to turn against them, with previously docile wildlife becoming uncannily coordinated in their harassment, and trees shedding massive rotten limbs in suspiciously timed accidents that blocked their path, while the very weather within the valley seemed to localize, with sudden dense fogs blinding them and torrential rains turning the earth to a clinging mud that immobilized their vehicles. And most chillingly, the loggers reported a growing psychological unease, a shared paranoia and vivid nightmares that drove them to abandon their expensive equipment and flee the area, a retreat they could never logically explain, their story dismissed as superstition, but later seen by researchers as a clear case of the kingdom protecting its own bodily integrity through a multifaceted strategy of psychological and environmental manipulation, a demonstration of a will to survive that was both subtle and absolute. Within the borders of the Entangled Kingdom, the normal rules of competition are often suspended in favor of breathtaking symbiosis, creating a society of mutualists where the lines between species are joyously blurred, as seen in the case of the sapphire moth, a creature that does not feed in its adult stage, but instead uses its iridescent wings to focus sunlight onto specific mosses, which in return release nutrients that are absorbed directly by the roots of nearby saplings, a three-way partnership of insect, plant, and fungus. And there are also the so-called weaver vines, which possess a primitive photosensitive ability, allowing them to grow in precise patterns to create natural lenses and light channels that illuminate the forest floor, fostering the growth of light-dependent fungi crucial to the network's health. And even the larger animals, from the solitary great cats to the herds of grazing ungulates, appear to play roles they're unaware of, their movements and grazing patterns seemingly guided by the kingdom to manage undergrowth and disperse seeds in a perfect, self-sustaining cycle of life. Each citizen an unwitting cell in a greater body, contributing to a harmony that has been perfected over eons. The ultimate expression of the kingdom's unified consciousness is the rare and spectacular phenomenon known as the bloom event, which occurs only once every several decades, triggered by a specific confluence of lunar, solar, and magnetic conditions. And as the moment approaches, the entire forest falls into a state of anticipatory silence, the air growing thick and heavy with released spores and chemical signals. And then, simultaneously, across thousands of square miles, every flowering plant erupts in a synchronized bloom, a riot of color so vast it can be seen from orbit, while the bioluminescent fungi and crystals of the heartwood nexus pulse with an intense rhythmic light, and the very air seems to vibrate with a chord of inaudible sound, a frequency that resonates with life itself. And for those few fleeting hours, the Entangled Kingdom reveals its true, magnificent nature, not as a collection of individual beings, but as a single glorious entity celebrating its existence, a sensory overload that represents the peak of the network's communication, a shared experience that reinforces the bonds of the whole, a breathtaking spectacle that is the kingdom's song, its prayer, and its memory, all woven into one luminous, unforgettable moment. Witnessing such a phenomenon forces a profound reconsideration of consciousness and life, challenging the anthropocentric view that intelligence must reside in a single, centralized brain. For the Entangled Kingdom presents a model of distributed cognition,